The morning sun streamed through the hospital windows as Aisha Chen gripped the edge of the front desk counter, trying to breathe through another contraction. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun and sweat beaded on her forehead. She had been timing her contractions for hours at home before deciding it was time to come in. They were now just 5 minutes apart. "I need to check in, please," Aisha said, her voice strained. "My contractions are getting really close together." The receptionist barely looked up from her computer screen. "Fill these out," she said, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "Both sides of each page. We need your insurance information and medical history." Aisha nodded and took the clipboard with shaking hands. She had already pre-registered online weeks ago, but she didn't have the energy to argue. She found a seat in the waiting area and began filling out the forms as quickly as she could, pausing every few minutes to breathe through another wave of pain. 20 minutes passed. The waiting room was quiet for a Tuesday morning, with only 3 other patients waiting. A white woman walked in, visibly less pregnant than Aisha and showing no signs of active labor. Within minutes, she was greeted with warm smiles and escorted through the double doors. Aisha returned to the desk, paperwork completed. "Excuse me, I finished everything. My contractions are getting stronger." The receptionist took the clipboard and skimmed through it with obvious disinterest. "Take a seat. Someone will call you when we have a room ready." "But I think I'm progressing quickly," Aisha explained, clutching her rounded belly. "This is my first baby, but my doctor said I might have a fast labor because everyone thinks they're special." The receptionist cut her off. "The triage nurse will determine how urgent your situation is. Please sit down." Aisha wished her husband Ray was with her. He had been away on business when her labor started and was now rushing back, still 2 hours away. She returned to her seat, feeling small and alone. Another 30 minutes crawled by. Aisha watched as 2 more patients were called back before her. One had arrived after she had submitted her paperwork. She approached the desk again, this time meeting the eyes of a different staff member. "I'm sorry, but I've been waiting almost an hour now. My contractions are less than 4 minutes apart." This woman, a nurse based on her scrubs, gave Aisha a once-over. "Are you sure you're counting correctly? First-time moms often think they're further along than they are." Aisha pulled out her phone. "I've been tracking them on my app, see? They started at 3 a.m. The nurse sighed. "Fine, follow me." Aisha was led to a triage room where she changed into a hospital gown. The nurse took her vitals with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact. "When was your last meal?" the nurse asked. "Around 6 a.m., just some toast and—" "Just the time is fine," the nurse interrupted. "The doctor will be in to check you. Don't walk around without assistance." Left alone, Aisha tried to make herself comfortable on the narrow bed. She texted Ray, letting him know she was finally being seen. The room was cold and she pulled the thin blanket around her shoulders. A different nurse entered without knocking. "We need to monitor the baby. Lie back." Aisha complied as the nurse wrapped 2 elastic bands around her belly, one to monitor contractions and one for the baby's heartbeat. The nurse adjusted them roughly, making Aisha wince. "Sorry," Aisha said automatically, though she had done nothing wrong. "Try not to move too much. You'll disrupt the reading," the nurse said before leaving. The contractions were getting stronger now, washing over Aisha in waves that made her grip the bed rails. She breathed through them as she had practiced in her birthing class, but it was harder than she had imagined. When a particularly painful one hit, she pressed the call button. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No one came. Aisha pressed it again. Finally, after 15 minutes, the nurse returned, looking annoyed. "Yes? I'm having really strong contractions. Could I have something for the pain?" The nurse checked the monitor. "You're still in early labor. We don't give pain medication until you're in active labor." "But it hurts so much," Aisha said, fighting back tears. "Of course it hurts. It's labor." The nurse adjusted the monitor straps. "The doctor will check how dilated you are, and then we'll talk about pain management. But you should try to tough it out as long as possible. It's better for the baby." Through the thin curtain separating her from the next bed, Aisha could hear another nurse speaking softly to a patient, offering ice chips and encouragement. The contrast wasn't lost on her. When the doctor finally arrived an hour later, he barely introduced himself before checking her cervix. 4 centimeters, he announced. "Still a ways to go. Can I walk around?" Aisha asked. "I read that moving can help labor progress." The doctor shrugged. "If you want, but don't go far from your room." He made a note in her chart and left without another word. A new nurse came in as Aisha was easing herself off the bed. "Where do you think you're going?" "The doctor said I could walk around," Aisha explained. "Well, we need to get you to a labor room first. And we're short-staffed, so you'll have to wait for transport." Aisha nodded and sat back down, feeling defeated. Through her door, she could see into the hallway where nurses were chatting and laughing at the station. No one looked particularly busy. Another hour passed before she was finally wheeled to a labor and delivery room. It was small, with old equipment and a view of the parking garage. Aisha had toured the maternity ward weeks earlier and remembered seeing larger rooms with birthing balls, rocking chairs, and views of the garden. "Is this the only room available?" she asked the transport aide. "It's what's assigned to you," he replied shortly. Left alone again, Aisha tried to focus on the fact that soon she would meet her baby. That's what mattered, not the room or the staff's attitude. But as another contraction gripped her, stronger than before, she wished for a friendly face, for someone who seemed to care. A knock at the door brought a thin woman in scrubs. "I'm Lily, your labor nurse," she said, checking Aisha's wristband. "I'll be with you until shift change at 7 p.m. "Nice to meet you," Aisha said, hopeful for a change in treatment. "My husband is on his way. He should be here in about an hour." Lily nodded distractedly as she checked the monitors. "Your contractions are still irregular. Sometimes with you people, labor can stall. We might need to give you medication to speed things up." "You people?" Aisha asked, Lily's face flushed slightly. "First-time mothers," she clarified, though Aisha wasn't convinced that's what she had meant. As Lily left the room, Aisha overheard her speaking to someone in the hallway. "Room 304 is going to be a long one. Probably doesn't even have insurance." Aisha's eyes welled with tears. Not only did she have excellent insurance, but she had spent months researching hospitals, reading reviews, and preparing for this day. She had chosen this hospital because of its reputation for care, never imagining she would be treated this way. Her phone rang. It was Ray. "Hey, I'm about 40 minutes away. How are you doing?" His voice was a comfort she desperately needed. "It's been rough," Aisha admitted, her voice breaking. "The staff here, they're not very nice." "What do you mean? What's happening?" Ray sounded instantly concerned. "They're just dismissive, like I'm bothering them by being in labor." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. "That's not acceptable," Ray said firmly. "When I get there—" "No, please," Aisha interrupted. "Don't make a scene. I just want to focus on having a healthy baby. We can deal with everything else later." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but I'm taking notes on everything. Names, times, what they say." "This isn't right. Just hurry," Aisha said as another contraction began to build. "I need you here." After they hung up, Aisha closed her eyes and tried to center herself. She thought of her mother's words from a phone call earlier that week. "You are strong like the women before you. Your grandmother crossed an ocean to give your mother a better life. Your mother worked 2 jobs to put you through school. Now you will bring the next generation into the world. Remember who you are." A new contraction, sharper than before, pulled her from her thoughts. Aisha pressed the call button again, determined to advocate for herself despite the treatment she'd received. This time, she would not be ignored. When the nurse Lily finally returned to Aisha's room, her expression made it clear that answering the call button was an inconvenience. "What is it now?" she asked, checking the monitors without looking at Aisha. "The contractions are much stronger," Aisha said, her voice strained. "I think I might be ready for some pain relief," Lily sighed. "I'll have to check you first. The doctor won't order anything unless you've progressed." Her examination was quick and rough, making Aisha wince. 5 centimeters, Lily announced. "You're making progress, but you're still in early labor." "But my contractions are less than 3 minutes apart now," Aisha said, showing the nurse her contraction timing app. Lily barely glanced at the phone. "The monitor shows they're not that strong. First babies take time. This could go on for hours yet." Through the thin wall, Aisha could hear a nurse in the next room speaking kindly to another patient. "Don't worry, we'll get you something for the pain right away. No need to suffer." Aisha took a deep breath. "Could I at least try the shower? I read that warm water can help with the pain." "That shower's broken," Lily said quickly. "Has been for days." Aisha had toured the maternity ward just 2 weeks ago. All the rooms had working showers then. She wanted to challenge this obvious lie, but another contraction hit. This one so intense she could only grip the sides of the bed and try to breathe through it. Try to relax, Lily said dismissively. Tensing up only makes it worse. As the nurse left, Aisha heard her mutter to someone in the hallway. Room 304 is being dramatic. These people always make such a fuss. Tears of frustration and pain welled in Aisha's eyes. She had expected labor to be difficult, but she hadn't expected to feel so alone and disrespected. She checked her phone. Ray had texted that he was stuck in traffic but getting closer. The next hour was a blur of increasingly painful contractions. Aisha tried different positions to ease the pain. Standing, kneeling, leaning over the bed, but nothing seemed to help. She pressed the call button twice more, but no one came. When the door finally opened, she expected to see Lily. Instead, a young resident doctor entered, looking rushed. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Dr. Rivera. I'm covering for Dr. Patel while he's in a C-section. How are we doing?" "Not great," Aisha admitted. "The contractions are really intense now and I haven't been able to get any help." Dr. Rivera frowned. "Let me check you." Her examination was gentle, a stark contrast to the nurse's rough handling. "You're at 7 centimeters now. You've progressed quite quickly. Can I have something for the pain?" Aisha asked hopefully. "Of course. I'll order an epidural right away." Dr. Rivera made notes in the chart. "Has anyone offered you ice chips or helped you change positions?" Aisha shook her head. "I'm sorry about that. We're a bit short-staffed today, but that's no excuse. I'll speak to the charge nurse." As if summoned by the criticism, Lily appeared in the doorway. "Is there a problem?" "Mrs. Chen is at 7 centimeters and needs an epidural," Dr. Rivera said. "Please call anesthesia right away." Lily's expression tightened. "We have 3 epidurals ahead of her. It could be a while. She's progressing quickly. Make sure they know that." Dr. Rivera's tone left no room for argument. She turned back to Aisha. "I'll check on you again soon. Hang in there." After the doctor left, Lily approached the bed with cold efficiency. "Turn on your side. I need to start an IV before the anesthesiologist comes." Aisha complied, relieved that help was finally on the way. The IV insertion took 3 painful attempts, with Lily muttering about difficult veins, even though Aisha had never had trouble with blood draws before. "There," Lily said, taping down the IV line. "The anesthesiologist will be here when they can. Don't get your hopes up about it being soon." Before Aisha could respond, the most powerful contraction yet washed over her. She gripped the bed rail, a low moan escaping her lips. "Keep it down," Lily said sharply. "You'll disturb the other patients." Just then the door opened and Ray rushed in, still wearing his work clothes, hair disheveled from the drive. "Aisha." He hurried to her side, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry it took me so long. Traffic was terrible." The relief of seeing him was overwhelming. Tears streamed down Aisha's face as she squeezed his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." Ray looked at the nurse. "My wife is in a lot of pain. What's being done about it?" Lily's demeanor changed slightly in Ray's presence. "The doctor has ordered an epidural. The anesthesiologist will be here when they can." "And how long will that be?" Ray pressed. "It's not up to me," Lily said defensively. "We have other patients." Another contraction hit and Aisha couldn't hold back her cry of pain. Ray's face hardened as he watched his wife suffer. "This is unacceptable," he said firmly. "Please get the charge nurse or supervisor in here now. Sir, you need to calm down." "Getting upset won't—" "I am perfectly calm," Ray interrupted. "But my wife has been here for hours receiving substandard care, and I want to speak to someone in charge." Lily's face flushed. "I'll see what I can do," she said before leaving the room. Once she was gone, Ray turned his full attention to Aisha. "Hey, you're doing amazing," he said softly, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth he found on the bedside table. "I'm here now. We'll get through this together." For the first time since arriving at the hospital, Aisha felt supported. "They've been awful, Ray," she whispered between contractions. "Like I'm not even a person." Ray's jaw tightened, but his touch remained gentle as he helped her sit up slightly. "I know, and we're going to address it later. But right now, let's focus on you and the baby. What can I do to help?" "Just stay with me," she said. "And don't let them ignore me anymore." "I promise," he said firmly. When the door opened again, a different nurse entered, followed by an older woman in a lab coat. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Dr. Winters, the attending physician on call." Nurse Lily mentioned there might be some concerns. Before Ray could speak, Aisha had another contraction. This one was different. more pressure than pain with an overwhelming urge to push. "I think I need to push," she gasped when it passed. Dr. Winters quickly examined her. "You're fully dilated. The baby's coming now." "But what about the epidural?" Ray asked. "There's no time," Dr. Winters said. "This baby isn't waiting." The room suddenly filled with activity. A new nurse brought in a rolling table of supplies. Another adjusted the bed into a delivery position. Dr. Winters calmly explained what was happening as she prepared. "You've progressed very quickly for a first time. Mom," she told Aisha, "when the next contraction comes, I want you to push while we count to 10. Ray held Aisha's hand, supporting her back as she leaned forward with the next wave of pressure. The sensation was intense. Burning, stretching, overwhelming, but also purposeful in a way the earlier pain hadn't been. "Good," Dr. Winters encouraged. "I can see the head. Rest a moment, then push again with the next contraction." The new nurse, whose name tag read Teresa, offered Aisha ice chips and wiped her face with a cool cloth. Her touch was gentle, her words supportive, a stark contrast to Lily's cold efficiency. "You're doing wonderfully," Teresa said. "Many first-time moms take hours to push, but you're making great progress. 3 more contractions, 3 more pushing efforts." And suddenly there was a slippery sensation, followed by an incredible release of pressure. A tiny cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Winters announced, placing the squirming, wet baby on Aisha's chest. "Born at 4:27 p.m. The world narrowed to just this moment, the weight of her daughter against her skin, the soft newborn cries, Ray's amazed laughter beside her. All the frustration and pain of the day receded as Aisha looked into her daughter's face for the first time. "She's perfect," Ray whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "You did it, Aisha. You were incredible." As the initial rush of meeting their daughter settled, Aisha became aware of the activity continuing around her. Dr. Winters was still working between her legs, and Teresa was preparing instruments on a nearby tray. "Just need to deliver the placenta and check for any tears," Dr. Winters explained. "Keep holding your baby. Skin-to-skin contact is the best thing for both of you right now." Aisha nodded, unable to take her eyes off her daughter. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up with dark, unfocused eyes. Her tiny hand curled around Aisha's finger. "Have you decided on a name?" Teresa asked as she helped position the baby for better skin contact. Aisha and Ray exchanged a look. They had narrowed it down to 2 options but hadn't made the final decision. "Nadia," Aisha said softly. "Nadia Chen Wang," Ray smiled. "It's perfect. Hope and new beginnings." As the medical team finished their work, Lily appeared in the doorway with another nurse who was pushing an equipment cart. "Anesthesiology is here for the epidural," she announced, then stopped short when she saw the baby already born. Dr. Winters looked up. "As you can see, we're well past that point, Mrs. Chen." Delivered quickly and beautifully without it, the look on Lily's face was a mix of surprise and something else, perhaps the realization that she had misjudged. How far along Aisha's labor had been. "I'll update the chart," Lily said stiffly before backing out of the room. In the peaceful aftermath of birth, as Ray took photos of their new family and Teresa helped Aisha begin nursing, the earlier mistreatment felt distant but not forgotten. Aisha knew they would need to address it eventually, but for now she allowed herself to be fully present in the joy of meeting Nadia. "Welcome to the world, little one," she whispered to her daughter. "You're already so loved." What neither Aisha nor Ray could know was that the story of their treatment was far from over, and that the hospital staff's attitude was about to change dramatically. Not because they had welcomed a new life into the world, but because of something else entirely. The recovery room was quieter than the delivery room had been. The excitement of birth had given way to a gentle calm as Aisha cradled little Nadia against her chest. Ray sat beside the bed, his eyes moving constantly between his wife and new daughter, as if he couldn't quite believe they were real. "She has your nose," he whispered, gently touching Nadia's tiny face with one finger. "And your chin." Aisha replied with a tired smile. The birth had been quick but intense, leaving her exhausted yet too wired to sleep. A knock at the door interrupted their quiet moment. Teresa, the kind nurse who had assisted with the delivery, entered with a clipboard. "How are we doing in here?" she asked, her voice soft. "Good," Aisha said. "Just getting to know this little one." Teresa smiled. She's beautiful. I need to check your vitals and the babies, and then I'll leave you alone for a while. As Teresa worked, Aisha appreciated her gentle touch and clear explanations, such a contrast to her earlier experiences. But Teresa was the exception, not the rule. When she left, promising to return in an hour, Lily took her place. The nurse who had been so dismissive during Aisha's labor didn't meet her eyes as she entered the room. "Time to move you to the postpartum floor," she said briskly. "Your recovery room is ready." "Already?" Ray asked. "It's only been 2 hours since delivery." "We need the space," Lily replied. "There are other women in labor." Before Ray could object, Aisha touched his arm. "It's fine," she said quietly. "I'd rather be in a real room anyway." The transfer to the postpartum floor was rushed and uncomfortable. No one helped Aisha into the wheelchair. She had to ease herself down while Ray awkwardly held Nadia. The orderly who pushed her wheelchair moved too quickly down the hallways, each bump sending pain through Aisha's tender body. Their new room was small and located far from the nurse's station. The view was of an air conditioning unit on the roof, and the bathroom light flickered ominously. "Someone will be in to check on you eventually," the orderly said before leaving them alone. Ray's face was tight with anger. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to speak to someone." "Not yet," Aisha said, reaching for Nadia. "Let's just try to rest first." "I'm so tired," reluctantly Ray agreed. He helped Aisha settle into the bed with Nadia, then went in search of ice chips and extra pillows. Left alone, Aisha studied her daughter's face. Despite everything, this moment was precious. Nadia's tiny fingers, her button nose, the soft rise and fall of her chest. These were miracles that overshadowed the hospital's failures. When Ray returned, his expression told her he'd had no luck. "The nurse at the station barely looked at me," he said, placing a small cup of ice chips on the bedside table. "Said they're short-staffed and we need to be patient." Aisha nodded, too tired to be surprised. "Come sit with us," she said, patting the edge of the bed. For the next hour, they existed in their own bubble, counting Nadia's fingers and toes, marveling at her perfect ears, and taking dozens of photos to send to family. But the peace couldn't last. Nadia began to fuss, rooting against Aisha's hospital gown. "I think she's hungry again," Aisha said. She tried to position Nadia at her breast, remembering what Teresa had shown her, but the baby wouldn't latch. After several attempts, both mother and baby were frustrated and crying. "I'll get help," Ray said, pressing the call button. 10 minutes passed. He pressed it again. Finally, after 20 minutes, a different nurse appeared. Her name tag read Diane, and her face showed no sympathy for Aisha's tears. "What's the problem?" she asked, standing at the doorway rather than approaching the bed. "We need help with breastfeeding," Ray explained. "The baby won't latch," Diane sighed. "The lactation consultant only comes in the mornings. You'll have to wait until tomorrow." "But she's hungry now," Aisha said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Isn't there someone who can help?" "I can try," Diane said reluctantly. She approached the bed and roughly adjusted Nadia's position. "Like this. Just make her take it." Her handling was so abrupt that Nadia began wailing louder. Aisha pulled her daughter closer, protecting her from the nurse's rough hands. "That's not helpful," Ray said firmly. "Is there anyone else available?" Diane's lips thinned. "Look, we're very busy. If you can't handle it, we can give her formula." "We were planning to breastfeed," Aisha began. "Well, plans change," Diane cut her off. "Some women just can't do it. It's nothing to be ashamed of." The dismissive comment stung, especially coming after barely a minute of half-hearted assistance. But before Aisha could respond, Diane was already heading for the door. "I'll send someone in with formula," she called over her shoulder. Once she was gone, Ray sat on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Aisha's shoulders. "This is unbelievable," he said quietly. "I've never seen such poor care." Aisha leaned against him, still trying to soothe Nadia. "I just don't understand. Is it because of how I look, my accent? What did I do to deserve this?" "Nothing," Ray said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. This is on them, not you." A different staff member brought formula 30 minutes later, dropping off the small bottle without instructions or encouragement. Through trial and error, they figured out how to feed Nadia, who hungrily accepted the bottle despite their original plans. As night fell, exhaustion overtook Aisha. Ray had gone to get food from the cafeteria, promising to bring her back something edible. Alone with her sleeping daughter, Aisha finally allowed herself to close her eyes. She woke to the sound of voices. Opening her eyes, she saw Diane speaking with another nurse just outside her door. "Room 415 is the one with the fussy baby," Diane was saying. "New mom anxiety. Everything's a crisis. Did you see her chart?" the other nurse asked. No prenatal classes, probably didn't read a single book about what to expect. Aisha felt her cheeks burn. She had taken every class offered by the hospital. She had read 5 different books about pregnancy, birth, and newborn care. She and Ray had created a birth plan and toured the maternity ward twice. The nurse's assumptions were not just wrong but cruel. When Ray returned with sandwiches from the cafeteria, Aisha told him what she had overheard. "That's it," he said, setting down the food. "I'm talking to the hospital administrator tomorrow morning." "This has gone beyond bad service to actual negligence," Aisha nodded, too tired to argue. They ate in silence, interrupted only by Nadia's occasional snuffles in her clear plastic bassinet. As the night progressed, Aisha developed a headache and noticed she felt unusually warm. When Diane came in for a routine check, Aisha mentioned it. "You're fine," Diane said without taking her temperature. "New moms often feel warm from hormones. Could you check anyway?" Ray asked. "She doesn't look right to me." Diane rolled her eyes but took Aisha's temperature. "It's 99.8, she announced. "Slightly elevated, but nothing to worry about." "Isn't any fever after birth a concern?" Aisha asked, remembering what she had read about postpartum infections. "It's barely a fever," Diane said dismissively. "If it goes over 100.4, let someone know. Otherwise, try to get some rest." By midnight, Aisha's temperature had climbed to 100.2, and she was feeling increasingly unwell. Her body ached all over, and she had begun to shiver despite feeling hot. Ray pressed the call button repeatedly, but no one came. Finally, he went to the nurse's station himself. He returned with Diane, who looked annoyed at being summoned. 11.1, she read from the thermometer. "All right, that's a low-grade fever. I'll let the on-call doctor know, but they probably won't do anything until morning." "That's not acceptable," Ray said firmly. "My wife is clearly sick. She needs to be seen now." "The on-call doctor is handling an emergency C-section," Diane said. "Your wife's fever can wait." "Then get another doctor," Ray insisted, his voice rising. "Sir, you need to calm down," Diane said coldly. "This kind of behavior doesn't help anyone." "I'll calm down when my wife receives proper medical care," Ray replied. "If no one is available on this floor, call someone from the ER. Call anyone. But she needs to be seen now." Their voices had woken Nadia, who began to cry. Aisha tried to reach for her, but a wave of dizziness made her fall back against the pillows. Seeing Aisha's distress, Diane's expression softened slightly. "I'll page Dr. Rivera," she conceded. "She's finishing her rounds on another floor. It might be a while." After Diane left, Ray gently lifted Nadia from her bassinet, soothing her while keeping a worried eye on Aisha. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Not good," Aisha admitted. "Everything hurts and I'm so cold." Ray pulled an extra blanket over her, then awkwardly tried to manage the fussing baby with one hand while texting with the other. "What are you doing?" Aisha asked. "Texting my cousin," Ray said grimly. "He's a doctor at County General. I want to know if we should take you somewhere else." Aisha closed her eyes, too tired to argue. The room seemed to be spinning slightly, and odd flashes of light appeared behind her eyelids. Something was definitely wrong, but in her feverish state, she couldn't summon the energy to be afraid. "Dr. Rivera will be here soon," she murmured, trying to reassure herself as much as Ray. She was kind before. She'll help us. What neither of them knew was that Dr. Rivera's arrival would set in motion a chain of events that would completely transform their hospital experience, though not for the reasons they might have expected. Dr. Rivera arrived just before 2 a.m., her white coat wrinkled from a long shift, dark circles under her eyes. Despite her obvious fatigue, she moved with purpose as she entered the room. "Mrs. Chen, I heard you have a fever," she said, immediately approaching the bed. She placed a gentle hand on Aisha's forehead. "You're burning up." Ray stood nearby, cradling Nadia. Her temperature was 101.1 about an hour ago, but the nurse said it wasn't serious enough to bother anyone. Dr. Rivera's expression tightened. She pulled out a thermometer and checked Aisha's temperature again. 102.3 now, she said, frowning. "How long have you been feeling unwell?" It started a few hours ago, Aisha said, her voice weak. Just a headache at first, then chills and fever. Any pain in your abdomen? Or unusual discharge? Aisha nodded. My stomach hurts. Everything hurts, actually. Dr. Rivera pulled back the blanket and gently pressed on Aisha's abdomen, noting her wince. I'm going to examine you, and then we need to run some tests. This could be the beginning of a postpartum infection. As she worked, Dr. Rivera spoke to Ray. How long did it take for someone to respond to your concerns? Too long, Ray said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We've been pressing the call button for hours with minimal response. When the nurse did come, she dismissed our concerns completely. Dr. Rivera looked up sharply. Which nurse? Diane, Ray said. But it's been the same with almost every staff member since we arrived. My wife was in active labor for hours before anyone took her seriously. Dr. Rivera's face darkened as she continued her examination. This isn't acceptable, she muttered, more to herself than to them. When she finished, she pulled the blanket back over Aisha. I'm ordering blood work and antibiotics. You have all the signs of endometritis, an infection of the uterine lining. It's serious, but treatable if we start now. She turned to Ray. Mr. Wong, you should take the baby to the nursery for now. Your wife needs rest, and we need to monitor her closely. Ray hesitated, looking at Aisha. It's okay, Aisha assured him, though her voice was weak. Go with Nadia. Make sure she's taken care of. After Ray left with the baby, Dr. Rivera sat on the edge of Aisha's bed. Mrs. Chen, I want to apologize for your experience here. This is not how we're supposed to treat our patients. Why has everyone been so cold? Aisha asked, her eyes filling with tears. Did I do something wrong? Dr. Rivera shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. There's no excuse for poor care, ever. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Unfortunately, we sometimes see disparities in how patients are treated based on assumptions. Because of how I look, Aisha said flatly. Because of my name. It shouldn't happen, Dr. Rivera said. But yes, studies consistently show that women of color receive different care in many hospitals. It's a systemic problem we're trying to address. She stood up, checking her watch. I'm going to personally make sure you get the care you need now. The night shift supervisor will be hearing from me, and I'll be documenting everything in your chart. After Dr. Rivera left, a flurry of activity began. A lab technician came to draw blood. A different nurse, not Diane, arrived to start an IV with antibiotics. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, Aisha felt that her needs were being taken seriously. Ray returned an hour later, reporting that Nadia was sleeping peacefully in the nursery under the watchful eye of a kind night nurse. He pulled a chair close to Aisha's bed and took her hand. Dr. Rivera seems to have lit a fire under everyone, he said. Suddenly people are checking on you every 15 minutes. Aisha managed a weak smile. It shouldn't take a doctor getting angry for patients to receive basic care. No, it shouldn't, Ray agreed. But for now, I'm just glad you're getting help. As dawn approached, Aisha's fever began to respond to the antibiotics. The pain in her abdomen lessened and she was able to sleep for short periods. Ray dozed in the chair beside her, waking whenever a nurse or doctor entered the room. Around 7 a.m., the door opened, and Diane entered with another nurse. Her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the dismissive attitude, replaced by an almost nervous energy. Good morning, Mrs. Chen, she said, her voice overly bright. How are you feeling today? Before Aisha could answer, the door opened again. A tall woman in a tailored suit entered, followed by Dr. Rivera and a man wearing a white coat and an ID badge that identified him as Dr. Wilson, Chief of Obstetrics. Mrs. Chen. Mr. Wong, the woman in the suit said, stepping forward. I'm Catherine Lin, the hospital administrator. Dr. Rivera has brought some concerns to my attention about your care here. Ray stood up, suddenly alert despite his exhaustion. Yes, we've had serious issues with the level of care my wife has received. Dr. Wilson moved to Aisha's bedside. I understand you developed postpartum endometritis, he said, checking her chart. Your latest vitals look better. How are you feeling? A little better, Aisha said. The pain isn't as bad now. Dr. Wilson nodded. Good, the antibiotics are working. But this infection should have been caught much earlier. He turned to the nurses. Why wasn't Mrs. Chen's fever reported immediately? Diane shifted uncomfortably. I did report it eventually. After Mr. Wong insisted, Dr. Rivera added. and by then her temperature had risen significantly. The hospital administrator stepped closer. "Mrs. Chen, I want to personally apologize for your experience. This is not the standard of care we strive for at Metropolitan Hospital." There was something in her tone, a nervousness that went beyond typical administrative concern. Aisha and Ray exchanged a glance, both sensing that something had changed. "We'll be conducting a full review of your case," Ms. Lin continued. "And in the meantime, we'd like to move you to one of our VIP suites for the remainder of your stay." "VIP suites?" Ray repeated, confused. "We don't have that kind of insurance coverage." "Don't worry about that," Ms. Lin said quickly. "It's the least we can do under the circumstances." Dr. Wilson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Chen, I understand you're starting a new position soon." Aisha nodded slowly, still puzzled by the sudden shift in treatment. "Yes, in about a month after my maternity leave." "Well," Dr. Wilson said, his smile now seeming forced, "we're very much looking forward to having you join our team." And suddenly everything became clear. They knew. Somehow they had discovered that Aisha wasn't just any new mother. She was Dr. Aisha Chen, the highly recruited pediatric surgeon who would be joining the hospital staff as the new department head in 4 weeks. The realization must have shown on her face because Ms. Lin quickly jumped in. "We would have extended the same courtesy to any patient who experienced difficulties during their stay." Ray's expression hardened. "Would you?" "Because my wife spent hours being ignored and dismissed. She developed an infection that could have been prevented with proper care. And suddenly, when you realize who she is, you're offering VIP treatment?" Dr. Rivera, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "I think what Mr. Wong is saying is that every patient deserves the same level of attention and care, regardless of their position or status." The room fell silent. Diane stared at the floor, her face red. Dr. Wilson shifted uncomfortably while Ms. Lin seemed at a loss for words. Aisha pushed herself up slightly in the bed, wincing at the effort. "I would like to see my daughter now," she said quietly but firmly. "And then yes, I would appreciate being moved to a more comfortable room. Not because I'm joining your staff, but because I've been through a difficult birth and a serious infection, and I deserve proper rest and care, just like every other patient." Ms. Lin nodded quickly. "Of course. I'll arrange for the baby to be brought from the nursery immediately." After the administrator and doctors left, with Diane trailing behind them, Ray sat on the edge of Aisha's bed. "So that's why everything changed," he said. "They figured out you're going to be their boss." Aisha shook her head, still processing what had happened. "It shouldn't matter who I am. Every woman deserves respect during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life." "You're right," Ray agreed. "But now that they know, we can use it to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." Aisha nodded slowly, an idea forming in her mind. Yes, we can." An hour later, they were settled in a spacious private suite on the top floor of the hospital. The room had a comfortable couch where Ray could sleep, a rocking chair for nursing, and large windows overlooking the city park. Nadia was back in her mother's arms, contentedly sleeping after a feeding. The difference in their treatment was like night and day. Nurses checked on them regularly. A lactation consultant spent an hour helping Aisha find comfortable breastfeeding positions. Food arrived hot and appetizing, not cold and unidentifiable like before. Dr. Rivera stopped by during afternoon rounds. "How are you feeling?" she asked, checking Aisha's latest lab results. "Better," Aisha said. "The fever's gone and the pain is much less intense." "Good," Dr. Rivera said. "The antibiotics are working well. We'll continue them intravenously for another 24 hours, then switch to oral medication." She hesitated, then added, "I wanted to tell you that I admire how you handled everything this morning. Many people would have just accepted the special treatment without pointing out the hypocrisy." Aisha smiled tiredly. "I've been thinking about it all day. About how many women go through what I did but don't have the advantage of eventually being recognized as someone important." Dr. Rivera nodded. "Too many." "Well," Aisha said, determination creeping into her voice, "that's going to change. At least at this hospital." As Dr. Rivera left, Ray looked at his wife with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're already planning something, aren't you?" Aisha gazed down at Nadia, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Yes," she said softly, "I am. But first I need to get well. And then we're going to make sure no one else is treated the way I was, regardless of who they are or what they look like." What had started as a nightmare of discrimination and poor care was transforming into something else, a mission. And as Aisha held her newborn daughter, she made a silent promise that her experience would become a catalyst for real change. 6 weeks after giving birth, Aisha stood outside Metropolitan Hospital, looking up at the imposing building where both her daughter had been born and her new job awaited. Nadia was at home with Ray, who had taken extended paternity leave to care for her while Aisha returned to work. She took a deep breath, straightened her lab coat, and walked through the automatic doors. The familiar hospital smell, antiseptic and artificial air freshener, brought back memories of her difficult delivery and recovery. But today was different. Today she wasn't a patient. She was Dr. Aisha Chen, the new head of pediatric surgery. "Good morning, Dr. Chen," called the receptionist as Aisha passed the front desk. The same receptionist who had made her wait in pain 6 weeks earlier now smiled broadly. "Everyone's excited to meet you." Aisha nodded politely but didn't stop to chat. Her first meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m., and she wanted to arrive early to prepare. The administrative offices were on the top floor, far from the maternity ward where she had spent those difficult days. Her new office was spacious with large windows and her name already on the door. Inside, a welcome basket sat on her desk, filled with hospital-branded items and a card signed by the board of directors. She had barely settled in when there was a knock at the door. Catherine Lin, the hospital administrator who had offered the VIP suite once Aisha's identity was discovered, stood in the doorway. "Dr. Chen, welcome to your first official day," she said warmly. "I hope you're finding everything to your liking." "Yes, thank you," Aisha replied, her tone professional but cool. Ms. Lin hesitated, clearly sensing Aisha's reserve. "Well, we're very excited to have you on our team. The board meeting is in conference room A whenever you're ready." After she left, Aisha took a moment to center herself. During her recovery, she had thought carefully about how to handle this transition. It would have been easy to come in angry, to immediately call out the discrimination she had faced. But that approach wouldn't create lasting change. Instead, she had developed a strategy, one that required patience and careful documentation. The board meeting was standard for a new department head's first day. Introductions, discussion of goals, review of department budgets. Throughout, Aisha was professional and engaged, giving no indication of her experiences as a patient. Several of the board members who had rushed to apologize when they discovered her identity now acted as if the incident had never happened. Only Dr. Rivera, who was also at the meeting as a junior staff representative, gave her a knowing look. After the meeting, Dr. Rivera caught up with her in the hallway. "So how does it feel to be on the other side?" she asked quietly. "Strange," Aisha admitted, "but necessary." Dr. Rivera nodded. "I've been thinking about what happened with your care. It wasn't an isolated incident, you know." "I know," Aisha said. "That's why I'm here today instead of at County General or University Hospital. Both offered me positions. You chose to come here because of what happened." Dr. Rivera looked surprised. "Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is from the inside," Aisha replied. "But I could use allies," Dr. Rivera smiled. "Count me in. Whatever you're planning, I want to help." Over the next few weeks, Aisha established herself as a skilled surgeon and respected department head. She was careful, thorough, and innovative in the operating room. She was fair and supportive with the residents and medical students. On the surface, it appeared she had moved past her difficult experience as a patient, but behind the scenes she was gathering data. With Dr. Rivera's help, she began reviewing patient satisfaction surveys, broken down by race, ethnicity, and language spoken. She examined complication rates across different patient demographics. She requested reports on wait times in the emergency department, sorted by patient background. The numbers told a story that couldn't be dismissed as one bad experience or a few insensitive staff members. There were clear patterns of disparate treatment throughout the hospital. 1 month into her new role, Aisha scheduled a meeting with Ms. Lin. She arrived with a thick folder of data and a clear agenda. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began once they were seated in Ms. Lin's office. "I wanted to discuss some concerns about patient care standards at Metropolitan." Ms. Lin smiled, clearly expecting a routine department head request. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Aisha opened her folder. I've been reviewing patient outcome data across different demographics, and I've found some troubling patterns. She laid out graph after graph, report after report. Women of color waiting 65% longer for pain medication in the emergency room. Non-English speakers receiving fewer follow-up instructions. Higher complication rates for Black and Latino patients even when controlling for pre-existing conditions. As the evidence mounted, Ms. Lin's smile faded. These are concerning statistics, she admitted, but many hospitals struggle with these issues. Healthcare disparities are a national problem. Yes, they are, Aisha agreed. But we have an opportunity to address them here at Metropolitan, and I have some specific recommendations on how to start. She outlined her proposal: mandatory bias training for all staff, from doctors to receptionists. Anonymous patient feedback systems specifically designed to track equity issues. Regular review of care metrics broken down by patient demographics. And most importantly, a new patient advocacy program that would provide support to those most vulnerable to discrimination. This is quite ambitious, Ms. Lin said carefully when Aisha finished. The cost alone would be less than the potential lawsuits, Aisha interrupted gently. And as for implementation, I've already spoken with several department heads who support these measures. She hadn't mentioned her own experience as a patient, but it hung in the air between them. The unspoken reminder of how badly the hospital had failed, and how fortunate they were that the patient they had mistreated was now in a position to address it professionally, rather than legally. Ms. Lin was silent for a long moment. "I'll need to take this to the board," she finally said. "Of course," Aisha replied. "I've prepared a presentation for them as well, and Dr. Rivera has offered to share her observations from the front lines." 2 weeks later, Aisha stood before the hospital board, her presentation ready. The room was tense. Some board members looked defensive, others uncomfortable. Dr. Wilson, the chief of obstetrics who had been so quick to offer special treatment once he discovered who she was, couldn't meet her eyes. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak today," Aisha began. "I'm here to discuss a critical issue affecting patient care at Metropolitan Hospital." She had debated whether to share her personal story. In the end, she decided it was necessary, not as an accusation, but as a lived example of the statistics she was presenting. 6 weeks before I joined the staff here, I was a patient in the maternity ward, she said, her voice steady. My experience was educational. I was dismissed, ignored, and ultimately developed a serious infection that was initially overlooked. The room was completely silent now, all eyes on her. "I'm not here to point fingers or assign blame," she continued. "What happened to me is unfortunately not unique. It's part of a larger pattern that the data clearly shows." She proceeded with her presentation, walking them through the same evidence she had shown Ms. Lin. When she finished, she looked around the room. "I chose to join Metropolitan despite my experience because I believe this hospital can do better. I believe we can be leaders in equitable care. The changes I'm proposing aren't just about avoiding discrimination. They're about providing excellent care to every patient who walks through our doors, regardless of who they are or what they look like." The discussion that followed was difficult. Some board members were defensive, others skeptical of the cost. But by the end of the meeting, they had approved a pilot program for Aisha's proposals, starting with bias training and the patient advocacy program. It wasn't everything she had hoped for, but it was a start. 3 months later, Aisha stood in the newly established patient advocacy office, watching as the first team of advocates completed their training. The program had been expanded beyond the initial pilot after showing promising early results. Dr. Rivera joined her, beaming with pride at what they had accomplished together. "You know, when you first told me your plan, I thought it was too ambitious." Aisha smiled. "Sometimes it takes someone who's experienced the problem firsthand to understand what needs to change." They watched as the advocates, a diverse group of staff members who had volunteered for the role, practiced scenarios they might encounter. Each would be assigned to help vulnerable patients navigate the hospital system, ensure their concerns were heard, and monitor for signs of biased treatment. Later that evening, Aisha returned home to find Ray dancing around the living room with Nadia, now nearly 5 months old. Their daughter's laughter filled the apartment, a joyful sound that still amazed Aisha every time she heard it. "How was your day, Dr. Reformer?" Ray asked, handing the baby over for a cuddle. Good, Aisha said, breathing in Nadia's sweet baby smell. The advocacy program is officially up and running. Do you think it will make a difference? Ray asked. Aisha thought about the data they'd already started collecting, the staff who had approached her with their own stories, the patients who had begun receiving more attentive care. It already is, she said. Small steps, but in the right direction.